Hi everyone, welcome back to episode number 2 of my editing series. Today we're taking a look at this image and we're going to go from this to this. And we're going to start by editing the photo in Lightroom and then bringing it over to Photoshop. So let's get started. So to begin, I will start by increasing the overall brightness of the image since it's fairly dark and I always shoot underexposed. Next, I'm going to increase the contrast a little as well. Since we brightened the image, there is now some overexposure on the highlights. So I'm going to bring those all the way down. In contrast, I will increase my shadows so we get more detail, especially on the bark of the tree. Like last video, I'm also going to increase my blacks so we can have a more faded look in the darker parts of the image. Next, I'm going to increase my texture to bring out more detail in the smaller parts of the image, but I also want to soften the larger details by bringing down the clarity. The image is also looking a little dull at the moment, so I'm going to push the saturation to get more color, and also the vibrance to target the color in the least saturated parts of the image. Next, I'm going over to the tone curve and start by brightening the darker parts of the image, but also darkening the shadows a little, keeping my midtones the same, and also brightening the highlights to create more contrast in our image. Since this is a wintry scene, I want to make the highlights a bit cooler by going to the blue tone curve and cooling down the bright parts of the image, while keeping the midtones and shadows the same. For the hue, I want to make the oranges and the leaves a bit more yellow. I'm also going over to the saturation tab and increasing the overall color in the oranges, the yellows, and the greens, which we have some in the trees in the background. I also think we have too much of a blue cast, especially in the shadows, so I'm decreasing both the aqua and the blue. And lastly, going to the luminance to make the blues a bit brighter, and also the oranges so they pop more. The next step, I'm going over to the color grading panel and warming up my highlights by giving my image a little bit of a warm look, especially in the highlights coming down through the trees. And also using complementary colors in my shadows to maintain a cool winter scene vibe in my image. I'm also going to use the same technique as in our last video by holding Option button on my keyboard or Alt on a PC and increasing the masking slider to select the edges of our image. I'm going to do the same with the detail and the radius slider by holding Option and dragging the slider until we can make out what the image is about. Perfect. The last step before we focus on the local adjustments is to go over to the calibration tab and boost the saturation in the blues a little, while dropping the hue to give a little more aqua style of our image. Same with the greens by boosting the saturation and turning our yellows a bit more green. Looks really good. We now move on to our local adjustments by creating a radial filter, focusing on the light coming down through the trees, and what I want to do is soften that light by decreasing the clarity. Perfect. I want to further edit that light coming down from the sky by creating a graduated filter, mainly focusing on the top part of our image, and in this case brightening a little since the light that was coming down was very strong. I will further soften the image by bringing down the clarity down and dropping the dehaze slider to add some fog and mist. I will add another graduated filter, this time on the bottom of our image, but I only want to select the highlights by selecting the range mask and choosing luminance and dragging the slider to select the bright parts of the image. I will now brighten that part of the image and give it a colder feel to it. Towards the right side of the image, I also find this side to be somewhat dark, so I'll create another filter and drag it from the left side, and adjust the brightness and soften that side as well to give that edge a little more glow effect. I'm also going to create one last graduated filter and dragging it on the outside right of the image, which will allow us to select all of it. But in this case, I only want to focus on the highlights, so I will use a luminance mask and dragging it towards the right, and in this case, drop the highlights a little since I am seeing some overexposure. And I will also brighten the shadows, which will give us some more of that glow effect on the image. One last filter I'm going to add is a brush tool while having the auto mask checkbox selected. And what I want to do in this case is I want that tree in the front to stand out a little more. So I'm going to use my mouse and select the tree. I will give it a bit of a warmer feel while also brightening it as well. We can see it stands out way more and adds some dimension to the photo. So the image is not complete in Lightroom. I will now edit the rest in Photoshop by right clicking on the image, selecting Edit In and Edit in Photoshop. In Photoshop, I always start by making a duplicate of my image so I don't lose the original. I'm now going to use the Nik Collection software ColorFX Pro to enhance my image and give it a dreamier look. So here our image is open in ColorFX Pro, and I always begin by using the Brilliance and Warmth filter, first to boost the overall saturation and give it a warmer vibe. The next filter, and one of my favorites, is the Glamour Glow effect, which, as the name suggests, gives the image a glow effect by creating a soft focus look, but I do have to be careful to not overdo it, as it can ruin our image as well. The next filter I will add is the cross-processing filter, which adds to the image a really artistic feel. But again, I do want to tone it down since it can really enhance the image and alter the colors in a way I may not like. I will follow by adding a Pro Contrast filter, which will alter the image by targeting and enhancing only the contrast. This will correct the image based on the tonality and boost contrast in the areas of the image that may look flat, while leaving the areas of the image alone which do not need it. I will follow by adding a tonal contrast filter, which works perfectly with the previous filter. This one is amazing since it can target the contrast only in the highlights, midtones, and shadows, giving me more control over which area of the image to target. The last filter I will add, and my second favorite in the Nik collection, is the foliage filter. With this filter, I can enhance the greens and oranges in the leaves and in the trees, and overall boosting the saturation in the greens, yellows, and oranges. I will now toggle the before and after, and we can compare how these filters have altered our image, enhancing it way more. I think it looks amazing. So this will conclude today's editing episode. Hopefully you guys learned something new and feel motivated to get out and choose some wonderful woodland sceneries of your own. As always, if you enjoyed this video and learned something new, I'd appreciate if you give this video a big thumbs up and consider subscribing to stay updated on my weekly editing tutorials. Thanks as always, and I'll see you guys in the next week. Bye for now.